And I'm pleased to introduce Kaz, who is going to moderate this session. And I will only say that what is between you and the evening reception on the rooftop of the South Bank Centre is 2 more sessions after this one. One is a plenary panel with local leaders from Milan, from London and Paris, and then the deputy mayor for Paris will close today. So we don't have long to go, but well done everybody for withstanding the heat. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Kaz.
Thank you, Barbara. Hello everybody, I'm Kaz Cannella. I work on the UK team here at Clean Cities, and I think when we were planning all the speakers and planning this conference back in freezing cold February, we didn't quite expect to be sitting here in a heat wave now in June. But this session is about partnerships and campaigning and making change happen. And I just wonder if you can raise your hand if that's what you're here to do, make change happen, to make our cities better for children and safer and better for children, exactly. So that's what we're going to really get to the heart of today. This conference is all about connecting with people, learning how do we all work better together. And we have 4 amazing panelists who are doing fantastic things from different sectors, from politics, from campaigning, from the public sector. And we're going to really learn about their successes and their challenges and how we can all work better together. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Caroline Russell to the stage, leader of the City Hall Green Group, who's going to kick us off with a keynote.
Thank you very much. Hold on, just get myself organised. Oops. And I've got 10 minutes, yeah? And there's a clock there. Excellent. Okay, hello everyone. Oh my God, it is so incredibly hot. I'm Caroline Russell. I'm an older white woman, about 5'4", with grey hair, cut in a bob, dark framed glasses. I'm wearing white trousers, a blue shirt, silver sandals, and I am probably looking more than a little bit crumpled after my journey on the Jubilee line to get here. Now, in the context of the potential for campaigners, policymakers, and the public sector to work together, shaping priorities for political administrations and turning ambition to action, I'm going to briefly share a bit about my background, because I've done all the different steps over the years. I started out as an artist in the 1980s and early 90s, with a brief stint as a cycle courier. By the end of the 90s, I had retrained as a civil engineer. I never practiced, but I did get that degree. But by that time, I had 3 small children and a growing sense of urgency about the dangers that were posed by rising traffic levels, even then in the early 90s. So I joined the Islington branch of the Pedestrians Association, now Living Streets, and campaigned locally, as I'm sure many people in this room have done, for things like zebra crossings where they're needed, 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and safer bike routes. I also realised then that having done all of that work with fellow campaigners, with residents, and with council officers, that actually I wanted to have a say on policy. So I joined a political party, and by 2014 I was the only opposition councillor on Islington Council to 47 Labour councillors in Islington, and in 2016 I also got elected to the London Assembly with Sian Berry, where our job is to check the Mayor's progress against his policy strategy targets, to bring Londoners' voices into City Hall, and to expose gaps in the Mayor's policies to him to make sure that he takes the action to fix those gaps. So I've been a local campaigner and a policy influencer since the 1990s, and I'm currently a London Assembly member and chair of the Transport Committee, which I'll come to at the very end. So I wanted to use an example of all the campaigning that has happened over the years in London on air pollution as a bit of an example of how so many different people make a contribution and can really build to the influence of actually making change, like getting something like the ultra-low emission zone brought in across the whole of London. Now, back in the early days, sort of 2010-ish, think back, Boris Johnson was mayor, we were preparing for the 2012 Olympics. Boris Johnson was gluing pollution to the ground by the monitors on Marylebone Road so that he could prove that the air was clean enough for all the athletes to come and run around and do all the sort of hefty athleting that they were up to. So in that context, I got invited as a campaigner to a meeting at City Hall, organised by a Green London Assembly member, Darren Johnson, and he'd brought together Simon Burkitt from Clean Air London, Frank Kelly, who is an academic at King's, Ian Mudway, an academic at Imperial, and a woman called Louise Francis from an organisation called Mapping for Change, which was about doing community air pollution monitoring. And this meeting was an absolute eye-opener for me, because suddenly I was seeing academics putting together medical evidence, politicians kind of thinking, oh, how can we help with this? So that was the Assembly. But also this amazing woman, Louise Francis, who was empowering communities to measure air pollution in their local area, to start telling stories in their local community, to start building a real understanding and acceptance of the fact that what came out of the tailpipe of cars was harming everyone's health, harming everyone's lung and heart health, and leading to lots of children having asthma. My kids had asthma, and so I really cared about this stuff. And in that context, so doing all of that, there were also sort of random bits of campaigning going on. I remember dressing up in a pinafore in a 1950s head cover with feather dusters, and we were campaigning outside the Department for Transport, wanting action on clean air. And then Jenny Jones on the Assembly produced maps identifying all the schools that were located on main roads across the whole of London. She did it by borough. And this was like a tool for all the campaigners in boroughs all across London to start using that information to make the case for action, whether it was at London Assembly level or local council level. And at that point, I was doing the community pollution monitoring with Mapping for Change. And we put up monitors outside the library, near the local parade of shops, at a bus stop where people waited and queued, near school entrances, and even in the park, because we wanted people in our area, partly to see us climbing up lampposts and installing the nitrogen dioxide measuring tubes, but also so that we could make a massive fuss in the local paper to actually get more people understanding that air pollution is a thing and that it's harmful. So the other piece that was going on at this point was actually meeting up with council officers and people like Elliot Trahan, who is now incredibly senior in air pollution at City Hall. But in those days, he came out to Islington Council one night and contributed to a scrutiny meeting into air pollution and what the council could do. And it has been amazing seeing Elliot, from being a very junior officer sort of back in like 2011 to now kind of having an awful lot more influence within City Hall. But I think, so that was all that sort of very grassrootsy type campaigning. Once I got elected to the Assembly, I was able to work with groups of residents all across London, people in outer London, desperate not to be left out of the Mayor's clean air zones that were being proposed at the time. And then all the groups like Mums for Lungs, Rosamond, the mother of Ella Kissy Deborah, all these people started campaigning and building the voices that were giving the mayor the confidence to keep moving on with the ULEZ, with the ultra-low emission zone. And there's even sort of an academic, Professor Andrea Sella, who invites me to go to talk to his first-year chemistry students at UCL every year to talk about the political context of the work they do to measure air pollution. And he gets them doing a first-year chemistry project where they make and build their own pollution monitoring kit. But he also sends them out to work in schools and then to engage with all the parents in those schools as a way, him as an academic, just trying to push the agenda of kind of getting more and more communities to understand the seriousness of air pollution and the harm it causes to our health. So, and then as the ultra-low emission zone rollout sort of went from being a T-charge, then a very central little minimal zone, it then went out to the north and south circular, and we kept pushing for it to be London-wide. And that final push needed a real push on equalities and thinking about what it meant for people with small businesses and making sure that the mayor was providing them with enough funding and support to be able to change their business model so they had cleaner vehicles, although I understand now that there's far too many compliant diesel vehicles in London, which is very worrying. But I suppose what I've tried to share with all of that is just this sense that every single voice in the political space is incredibly important. Sharing information in every space that you're in, whether it's your next door group or different WhatsApp groups with your street, or whether it is, any kind of group that you're involved in, it's your voice speaking up and talking about how important clean air is, helps to change the political narrative and helps the politicians to stand up when they come up against the war on the motorist and people pushing back against doing the right thing. So I think the recent clean air results are a complete testimony to all the work that so many people, and I can see people in this room who've been involved in that work over the years, have contributed. And I hope that just provides a context of how change can come about. We could have done exactly the same talk for SUVs and road danger, but that'll have to be another day. And then just finally, as chair of the Transport Committee, I just wanted to very briefly explain what that role involves. And the biggest challenge of it is working cross-party with Reform, Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem and Green within the London Assembly to come to joint cross-party positions on transport issues on behalf of Londoners. And with the current division in politics, that is really challenging. I have managed to get agreement that the lens for our scrutiny for this year is through the Mayor's transport strategy, how the Mayor is doing with meeting the strategy goals, in particular Vision Zero, and accessibility of our transport system and transport networks for children, older and disabled people. One tiny final thing, and then I'm going to stop. Our current investigation is looking into autonomous passenger vehicles, which are being imposed on London. We're trying to work out whether the TfL even has any opportunity to push back on it. One of the things that, in relation to this conference, that is really worrying that we've discovered is that the current autonomous vehicle technology is 20% less likely to recognize a child as a person in the street compared to the ability to recognize adults as people in the street. So just that piece of information alone about the disproportionality in this technology that is being imposed on London is absolutely incredibly worrying, and we are going to obviously be making some very, very strong recommendations on that when we finish off our report. But I think I've done just over 10 minutes, so I'm sorry. Do I hold on to one of these? Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Caroline. And I feel like that meeting that you all had with Jenny Jones and various people, where you're saying that's kind of where the magic happened, and everyone started to understand other people's jobs, other people's stories. And I think that's the kind of thing we're going to talk about today, is like, how do we create those moments, and how do we bring people in from all sorts of different backgrounds and communities to make sure that the things that we're doing for our cities and our places are actually working for people. I think you touched on road danger and Vision Zero, which I think is something very close to all of our hearts. So I just want to, I'm going to introduce our three other panellists, first of all. So we have Nicola Pastore, co-founder of Solve the School Run. We have Harry Gray, who is on the steering group for Walk, Ride Greater Manchester. And we have Etive Curry, who is a senior planner from Glasgow City Council. So I'm first going to ask if anyone has any burning reflections, anything from Caroline's talk, something about this way of working, any current opportunities that you want to jump in with.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Really happy to start with that. So at Solve the School Run, we are really focused on trying to enable families to have primarily safer, but also greener and cleaner journeys to school. And what really resonated with me with what Caroline was saying about generating that public demand and having visible demand, loud demand that politicians hear, so it makes it easier for them to take those difficult decisions, is absolutely critical. And just going to touch on the latest election campaign that we ran, our Streets for Kids campaign around the London elections, where we, together with Clean Cities, we targeted 4 of the most progressive London boroughs and ran a grassroots campaign around safer streets for kids. And the manifesto was around effective school streets for all schools, primary and secondary. It was around access to cargo bikes and a child-friendly curbside. And every single politician or political candidate in those very progressive boroughs that we spoke to said, we want to do this, and we probably will commit to it, but we have to hear the public demand. We have to hear it and we have to see it, because otherwise it's so hard. And you think those are the people who are weathered by this, who are already doing it and have been through it and making the change. So I think that lens of absolutely, as kind of campaigners or community organisers, ensuring that you build that trust with politicians and you have that dance where you are publicly but constructively calling for the change you want to see is really essential.
Absolutely. Harry, I was going to come to you next, because I know that you have done some great partnership work which has led to a big success for Walk Ride GM. So please tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we were successful in bidding for the Active Travel England Innovation Fund, which meant we've got £100,000 to deliver a paid coordinator to deliver a network of walking and cycling buses across Trafford and Manchester. And the big one of the main reasons that we got that is because we've spent years developing really close relationships with those two councils. Mm-hmm. We've been reassuring councillors and leaders, executive members around, schemes that they've been implementing and cheerleading them. As Alexander was saying, our job's to flatten the hill of hysteria and be the, for instance, on Facebook groups, we coordinate people to just, like posts and comment saying good work. It's simple things like that politicians just and it's quite simple, but it works and it's effective. So because of that hard work we put in the background, to sort of get to know councillors, understand what they want first, because it's not about what we want, councillors, it's about what they want, and learn about what they want from their community and how that can we can fit into that a bit as well, because different areas of the city are going to be different. And we've just spent a few years doing that, building up. Yeah, and it got to the point where we've got such a good relationship with council's officers that we were able to put this bid in with the full confidence from, these as delivery partners, as well as being critical friend, by the way. So that's a real tough sell to say that we're now going to be a delivery partner with the council, but also we get to criticise you on other issues, and that's, that that line that we have to straddle, it's a tough game, but that's the game we have to play to get stuff to happen, otherwise nothing will happen.
Absolutely. And do you think that a key reason why you won that bid was having that unity of the local council joining with you and just showing that you're working in partnership?
Well, other than the fact that Manchester just seems to be in fashion at the moment as a city.
Go with the moment.
Obviously, I'm going to claim it as our success, not just Manchester's in fashion. It was that really, because I think as a campaign group, this is our first big project like this, and we are a volunteer group. And just to say also, it wasn't just the councils; it was actually building relationships with Active Travel England as well. And so they trust us. So we're not just an unknown entity, especially when I know they're in York, Active Travel England, but a lot of the campaigning world is very London-centric. And as I would say, Walk Ride Greater Manchester, it's quite hard outside of London to be a big campaign group because a lot of the stuff happens here. Mm-hmm. So we've had to really try to put ourselves on the map a bit, I'd say, with the national stuff too, as well as proving ourselves locally,
Yeah, and congratulations, and we're expecting to see loads of amazing bike buses throughout Greater Manchester, really pushing forward that movement, which has a natural build, but if we can build it and help push it even more to enable more kids to cycle safely to school. Etive, I'm going to come to you now, and I'd love you to tell us a bit more about the work you're doing in Glasgow with the Play Sufficiency Standard, and maybe a little bit about your partnerships and how you're working with communities to ensure that what you're doing actually works for the different people, the different children who you're providing it for.
Okay, thanks. Play sufficiency is now, assessments are now mandatory in Scotland, so every local authority has to do one. And I was asked to do the one in Glasgow. And if I tell you, my mantra is doing things with people, not to them, but with people. And I decided right from the get-go that my main partner would be the children. So I worked with education colleagues to do nursery and primary school, and we came up with just a word cloud that said, can I run, jump, swing, play, wherever. And the teachers took the children out of school and demonstrated where they went when they weren't in school. So they told the teachers where they played, what they did. And then my final question to the primary school kids was, if you had a magic wand, what would your ideal play space look like? And I got a load of absolutely amazing drawings and pictures. So then comes the teenagers, not so easy a crowd to please. The teenagers, I worked with colleagues. We have a group in our council that's called the Centre for Civic Innovation, and they work with citizenship, involving people in engagement. So I said to them, look, I'm looking for a school, can you help me out? So we did St Paul's High School in the south of the city, also quite a deprived area. And we went out and we said, right, okay, what does play mean to you? And we went out over a course of, I think it was about 10, 12 weeks. The adults in the room just posed the question, sat back and listened, then reflected back what they'd heard and said, okay, how do we move this forward? How do we come up with a methodology that we can send across all our high schools in the city? And that included our assisted learning schools as well. So what we did was we came up with this, it's a 10-minute easy Mentimeter. They ask some questions, and then the pupils host what we call a design jam, and they talk about not just play, where they go to hang out, they talk about barriers to being able to hang out with their friends, and they also talk about place and placemaking. And now that we've done all that and we've mapped it out, and if anybody wants our story map, I'm quite happy to share that with you. And so now we've taken all of the stuff that we've got from the children. So what have they told us about where they go, what they do, what's it like to be young in Glasgow. And we've just produced our Places for Play handbook for developers and communities, so that we are demonstrating what the children have said, and we're reflecting that back, and we're saying to developers, no, you can't just come along and put off a fenced area and call it a play. We want the children involved in the design process. We want the children to take you to the sites and tell you how they want to see things changed. And that is getting traction in our planning applications. I've been involved in a lot of discussions. We also won the RTPI award in Scotland for our methodology for the PSA, which I was totally surprised about. But I think it's about the partnerships. I don't tend to be usual partnerships or the usual suspects. So council, I have loads of hills of hysteria in the council because we're a very hierarchical organisation. So I describe myself as a quiet influencer. So I tend to seek out the people that I know will fight the cause and argue our case. So I've had help from Inspiring Scotland, which is a third sector organisation. I've had help, just people that, constantly give the message that you were wanting to hear. And now we're now looking towards how do we humanise our public spaces. So I like a bit of riot and rebellion. So that's our next challenge.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Jump in.
Just going to come in on what you were saying there, and in Greater Manchester there's 10 councils, which is a little easier than London. But it's interesting when you work across 10 councils and get to understand how different councils work, you realise that the decision making and the power and how things work is so different in each council. So like sometimes it's led by the politicians, sometimes it's more officer led, but then sometimes it's different departments, like the officers in active travel, let's say, are leading something, but then actually sometimes it's public health or, parks, for instance, have been a big driver of removing barriers, the parks team. So when I say barriers, I mean like the access control barriers. So it's just about understanding almost the how councils work and where the people are in them, and getting a bit of a sense. And I know councils from the outside, they seem like an impenetrable wall of like, most people don't understand how councils work. And I guess our job, and I was saying this earlier, is our job is to be like the bridge from councils to the general public, because we have the resources and knowledge to understand how councils work, but we're also better than councils with the community and understanding what communities want and need. And it's about bridging the two so that the councils can feel confident in what they're trying to deliver. So for instance, on school streets, school streets, I can't believe are contentious, it sounds crazy. But they are, and at the start of the school streets programme, and it's incredible to hear that was it 800 in London? Mm-hmm. I mean, Andy Burnham, who's going to be the Prime Minister, he announced 100 in Greater Manchester, and that caused a panic, the idea of having 100. It's just, we're that bridge, and it's just, understanding that it's like a triangulation, and without us, sometimes that communication between councils and the public can falter, as we've seen with botched consultations and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I think, Nicola, you've had experience of that, and Lambeth Council particularly have said, we need you, all the work that you have done to mobilise the residents, and you can push harder and you can say different things, and you did push harder for Lambeth to get all these wonderful, fantastic, comprehensive school streets. And how did you find that push and pull? And was it, always a good relationship, or was it sometimes difficult to kind of say those things that need to be said?
Yeah, so we sort of had a transformational school journey, if you will. And I would say 6 years ago, when my eldest son was in reception, our journey to school was an absolute hellscape, as I still think it is for most London parents. But in the course of those 5 years, we have had a 2-kilometre bike lane go in on the road that the school is on. We have had 12 zebra crossings go in around the area. We've had a controlled parking zone, which, absolute hill of hysteria on that one, residents weeping. And then the seismic piece was a incredible school street that went in on what was is a very busy road, but was certainly a very busy road between 8 and 9, 800 cars per hour. So it's one of the most ambitious school streets in London in terms of the extent of road space that it filters to prioritise walking and cycling, as well as the volume of traffic it addressed. And the bike lane I mentioned was the one that Rosina has been mentioning a lot, which had the legal challenge. So we have been right in the hill of hysteria and the centre of a lot of campaigning on this. I think there's 3 things, and I know we're short for time, so I'll just quickly reel them off, that when I was reflecting on this session, I think have been so valuable for us. And the first one is obviously around engaging your counsellors. There's a lot of new counsellors in London. There's a lot of young counsellors, which is amazing to see, but they may not have the child lens if they don't have children or haven't been around those places. So we call it a show and tell, get your counsellor to see the space and get them to see the support for change. And I think we have to be a bit more creative about doing that because, schools are very easy to mobilise parents around. We see it, the demand all the time. You can, I've seen WhatsApp groups open in school communities and 100 parents join in 15 minutes because it's about improving a crossing outside their school. Parents care, but we have to make it easier for their voices to come through. When our bike lane was consulted on, it was a 7 p.m. meeting on a Monday night in the nearby community hall. I'm in a dark room putting my kids to bed, right? So, bringing it to the school gates, bike buses, before school protests, just make it what the parents doing already, and then they can get involved. So showing and telling. I'll just be quick. The second piece is actually all around the personal motivations of your politicians and your counsellors, because sometimes the evidence in the stories isn't enough. So you have to listen carefully to what their hesitancies are and what their blockers are. And for us, when we stopped feeling so angry about the situation and forthright and really listened to their hesitancies, it really was that they didn't want to face going and talking to residents on the surrounding roads about the idea of this big programme because they just didn't want to take that on. So we went and got loads of supporters around those surrounding roads so that they were asking them for the school street too. So we removed that barrier, and then they were very motivated to move forward. And I think the third part that I will just talk through very briefly, and you'll definitely talk more about this, is celebrating the successes. You can't just call for something and call for something. You have to celebrate what's happened and celebrate the wins and thank them for it, but give them the opportunity to emotionally engage with the change they've created. So because we're all fundamentally motivated by emotions, aren't we? So we use bike buses, we run them once a term, but we are using them to celebrate our school street and our bike lane and give Rosina and Will Norman and people that do take the flak the chance to see the happy faces and the impacts that it's making.
Brilliant.
So those are my 3 thoughts.
And Caroline, you said that you're bridging the gap, telling the mayor what he's missing, and I've seen you do that so amazingly. Is there any advice that you have for us campaigners working in the public sector? What else can we be doing to bring those voices to the front to ensure the politicians are really hearing what we're saying?
I think the most important thing is to do everything you can to understand how councils work, which is what has come across on this panel. and to respect the council officers, because council officers have got a really, really difficult job to do. Sounds like you've had an amazing situation. I mean, I love the sound of all that work talking to the young people. The number of complaints you get as a local councillor about young people and antisocial behaviour, and it actually turns out to be a few young people sitting on a bench being a bit annoying. And it's like having a good relationship with council officers can actually help the council to navigate when there's a bit of noise about something like that in a way that comes up with much, much better outcomes for everyone. So I think get to know council officers, really respect them and understand the pressures that they're under, and kind of also understand that when you've got newly elected councillors, they may be, you explained some of them being very, very young. You know, they may not be very experienced. They may be at the beginning of their political journey, and really take the time to talk them through why things matter and try and understand what it is that motivated them to stand and represent their community. So I think it's, listen to everyone.
I was just going to come in there and say that in Glasgow we have amazing political support. The councillors are super supportive. Senior officers, not so much. But I kind of tend to circumvent them to say, well, actually, I find the people that have the passion, the resilience, and want to deliver. Now, we had over 5,000 children respond across nearly all of our schools. And it was an increase, and I still can't get my head around this figure, but it was an increase of 1,754% participation rates.
Wow. Amazing.
Say circumnavigating problem officers is a lot of what we do. I was just going to touch on some innovations that we've done to help support councils. One of them is that we started an awards night, and I guess that's not an innovation in itself, but the purpose of the awards night was just to give councils a moment to celebrate themselves, give them an award, say well done, because most of the time no one's saying that to them at all throughout the year. So, and in a sense, actually, that created competition amongst councils. So we see that officers are really competitive and they want to win it this year. And then the exec for Transport Manchester, this year we're going to take it back, when they lost it to Trafford. And so that a bit of competition too doesn't go amiss, especially, in some places you get rival councils, different dynamics. It's quite funny, amusing from the outside. And then another innovation is we use a Discord server, and actually we found that Discord's been really useful because on social media, actually councillors have started retreating because they don't want any of the flack, and it's just too much. And we've been able to get a lot of them over onto a Discord server that's about 500 people we have in there, and it's campaigners, officers, councillors. It's a big mix of people, and it's a real working space where people behind the scenes get stuff done quietly. We're not talking about it loudly. We're not creating a hill of hysteria, but we're actually squashing it because we coordinate on the Discord. So, for instance, when there is hysteria, we coordinate. We say, okay, we need to get this many people, comment this, do that, say this, and it works.
Yeah.
It's a magic.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So collaboration, understanding each other, being nice to each other, helping each other, I think is so key. So we have only got about 4 minutes left. So we're now going to turn to some questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have a question for any of our panelists. Got a roving mic? Yeah, excellent.
Good evening, and thank you very much for your contributions. My name is Gabriella, and I work for Green School Runs. We are a charity based in Camden. I have a question for Caroline Russell. So we've been leading a community campaign to improve a school bus in North London, which will connect, yes, so which will
Email last night.
Yes, which will connect over 20 schools and 2 communities which are not well linked by public transport. So we think we have all the right ingredients. We are backed by our communities. We are backed by essential workers, councillors from all parties, MP, the heads of all schools. and yet we cannot achieve any change. We feel we kind of meet all the right objectives: air pollution, working towards Vision Zero, reduced car journeys, improve independence. So do you have any advice for us on how we can make sure that decision makers are actively engaging with us campaigners? Thank you.
You're in a really difficult situation because TfL is changing bus routes and making these changes all over London, and not necessarily communicating those changes brilliantly. And also, if you live near a tube station, that tube station never moves. It's like you always have access to a service that you can use to get around London. If you live near a bus station and your bus route changes, then you might or a bus stop, you might no longer live quite so close to a bus stop, or that stop may not be served by the same bus. This is something that I have loads and loads of casework on. Andre, who's sitting in front of you, works with me at City Hall. We've literally only just passed your thing on to TfL to get a kind of a response, but I was absolutely planning to come back to you with some thoughts about how best to campaign to take that forward, because I think the case you've made is really strong. But it's a complicated situation at the moment because we've still got so much congestion in London. The buses are getting congested, not working efficiently, which is why they're making so many changes and which aren't necessarily helping. But this sounds like a great suggestion, and we'll see what TfL come back with, and then we can have a conversation to make a plan.
Great, thank you. So we have got one, we can do one more question. Over there, yes.
My question is probably mostly to Nicola, but as a local school mum and school governor, how do we get rid of the stigma around cargo bikes? I have one mother that turns up in her 4x4 and parks basically on the zebra crossing, who gets far more tolerance and respect than the mums who turn up on cargo bikes, who get looked down their noses and referred to as the yummy mummies. Although they're not, but it's just this, has it come from the car industry? Where has this total reverse snobbery towards cargo bikes come from?
Flashing, it might be out flashing. So, great question. I'm obviously a Londoner. I have a cargo bike, fully understand the context. We are really trying to address this. We just did some research with Clean Cities on the fact that using a cargo bike, buying a cargo bike and travelling with your family by cargo bike, including public transport, versus buying a car to get your family around and maybe other public transport around that lifestyle. But the cargo bike lifestyle is £4,000 a year cheaper than buying a car and getting around by car is your primary form of transport. So we have to get much more information out there on the savings that you can make by, having a cargo bike and not a car. And I also think that there's something around capturing the new generation of parents coming through, because it's difficult to get the SUV driver to switch to the cargo bike, right? But actually capturing those families, just had a baby or first, second child, where they haven't made that choice yet, and it's like, do we get a cargo bike, do we get a car? Like, that's where we need the info campaign to really, resonate, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that is all we have time for today. So thank you very much to our brilliant panellists, and please give everyone a round of applause.